All right, good afternoon. It's October 14th, 2020. We are at the Murray State University. I am Bikram Subidi, back of the camera. Today we have Morgan Morse, a senior chemistry biochemistry student at Murray State University, interviewing Miss Erica Gray as a part of his series of the Senior Chemist Project for American Chemical Society, Kentucky Lake Section. Morgan, take it away.
To start off, would you mind sharing some information about your academic background and your career?
Sure. My name's Erica Gray, and I'm a high school chemistry teacher at Calloway County High School in Murray, Kentucky. My career did not start in the classroom. I originally did undergraduate ovarian and breast cancer research at Indiana University in Bloomington, Indiana. And then when my husband and I got married, we transferred to South Florida, and there weren't research jobs available there. And so I sort of fell into teaching because there was a high need for science teachers in that area of the country. So I started out teaching middle school science, general physical science and biology. And when we transferred back to Murray, which is my hometown, in 2007, I started teaching high school in McCracken County. And then I moved back to Calloway in 2008, and so I've been teaching physical sciences, but mostly chemistry since that time.
Okay. Aside from the move, did you have like someone in your life that like made you want to, or like an event that made you want to teach high school instead of middle school?
I think I really enjoyed my high school science experiences. I had excellent teachers at Calloway. Miss Brenda Call was my physics teacher. She was an exceptional teacher. Miss Yvette Pyle was my chemistry teacher. And then when I transferred to Indianapolis, my junior year of high school, I had excellent anatomy and physiology teachers. So really inspiring teachers who knew their content, were passionate about it, and were able to get me excited about learning science. No one in my family has a science background. I'm the only one who's gone into science. Both of my parents were artists, and so I didn't really have anybody at home to, to look in that direction in terms of science. But there was definitely something happening inside the walls of school that was inspiring.
Mm-hmm. So would you say like those high school teachers that you had like made you want to lean towards chemistry, or did you have something like in college that made you like want to steer more towards chemistry?
Well, my degree is actually in biology.
Okay.
And so it's a kind of a funny story about how I got to teach chemistry. But so I have a BS in biology and a minor in Spanish. And then I got a master's degree in TESOL, teaching English speakers of other languages, because I taught at a primarily Spanish-speaking middle school in South Florida. And so I needed a way to meet those students' needs there. So a lot of people are asking, well, where does the chemistry come in? I received my national board certification in chemistry because when I moved back to Kentucky, there were not any biology positions available. And so if you have a science degree, depending on the number of chemistry classes you've taken, which for biology majors, it's a significant number of chemistry classes that you'll take, you'll end up with, at least probably close to a minor, if not a minor. And so I was able to add on chemistry teaching certificate to my teaching certificate. So while my primary degree is biology, I have never taught a biology class. It's always been chemistry or early on the physical sciences.
Okay. Would you mind sharing a unique challenge associated with teaching in high school?
I think finding a way to motivate students that have a block already about, I'm not good at science, I'm not good at math, this is too hard. If they come in feeling like they are going to not be successful, it can sometimes be a challenge to reach them. Currently, right now, the biggest challenge teaching in a pandemic is being able to meet the needs of all of your students. I have about 50% of my students in person, and I have about 50% at home, some with internet access, some without internet access. And so being able to see their faces, to explain to them, do things like that, can be a challenge during a global pandemic. When it's not a global pandemic, it's just sort of the normal challenges of meeting people that maybe aren't quite motivated.
Mm. So what were some things that you have done to help make teaching during a pandemic better for the students? Because I know it can be difficult on both ends. So,
so I try to make myself available as much as possible, holding online office hours, reaching out to them through a variety of methods. But I think honestly, approaching every situation with patience and grace is important right now. I think a lot of students, while they may not express the level of stress that they're feeling, it's certainly there. And I think that all teachers are aware of it, and we go into those interactions trying to, to help them feel a little bit better and maybe help them not feel so overwhelmed.
Do you have any suggestions for a certain skill set needed for those who are willing to go into a profession like yours?
Oh, absolutely. So on the chemistry aspect of it, the content knowledge is crucial. It's not a discipline where you can fake it. You really do have to know your material inside and out. So a strong background, strong content knowledge in chemistry is important, or if you don't have it, the willingness to learn, and the willingness to learn really quickly. Because in a teaching position, you may have a certain degree, a certain certification, and then you go in for an interview and they're like, well, we actually need you to teach this. And so you may have to really, kind of figure out exactly what it is you need to know to present to the students in a pretty short period of time. The other thing I would say is you need to have some ability to perform. A lot of teaching is performing and keeping students' attention, and so I'm naturally really introverted, but I can't be that way in the classroom. I have to hold their attention, I have to interact with students, and so in my interactions with adults, I'm usually a little bit more shy, but with my students I have to be extroverted. And then also I think, as I mentioned before, patience and grace. You have to remember the population that you're dealing with. They may look like adults, but they are not necessarily all there maturity-wise, and so you really do have to be patient and be willing to give people second chances, and sometimes help them through, drag them through if necessary, to help them, find their way to be successful.
That was some really good advice. Have you been indirectly or directly involved in any professional society, scientific society, throughout your college time or just your overall career?
Yes, absolutely. I belong to the American Association of Chemistry Teachers, AACT, Kentucky Science Teachers Association, and National Science Teachers Association. I have attended lots of really good professional development. Chem Ed is a great biannual chemistry conference that's held around the country, different parts of the country towards the end of the summertime, that has excellent chemistry teacher professional development, which is something that's fairly difficult to find in areas that aren't super populated. So most of that has been in my professional career. I think as an undergraduate, though, the student members of the American Chemical Society is an excellent place to start for people that are interested in going into chemistry or interested in going into any sort of pre-professional program.
Aside from finding these societies in areas with lower populations, have there been any other challenges faced with joining one?
Sometimes the cost can be quite a bit. If you want to attend NSTA or KSTA conferences, the membership might be, so the registration fees for the conferences might be $500 or $600, and if you're in a budget cycle with a school district that maybe doesn't have the funds to send you to these conferences, that can be sometimes cost prohibitive depending on where you are in your life. If you're just starting out as a teacher or something, that may not be something that you have in the budget to do. But then otherwise, finding the time to be able to fully invest in all of the options that those professional organizations have can be a challenge, because especially with teaching, there's a lot that goes on after school. Most high school teachers coach or sponsor or after school organizations extracurriculars, and so those can be, I wouldn't say time consuming, but they certainly take up extra amount of time in the afternoons and evenings. And then of course if you have a family or anything like that, those will be the the other hours that you're spending. So those would be some perhaps some roadblocks or obstacles to being fully invested in the professional aspect of those organizations.
Personally, how has your involvement been in the ACS Kentucky Lake section?
I was invited by Dr. Leganathan in several years ago to start attending some of the meetings, and my involvement has, some years it has been greater than others, just depending on other activities or obligations that I had during the school year. But I have found it to be an excellent resource of seeing what other people are doing with science in this area. I especially enjoyed a presentation on the LBL furnaces, and was able to report back to my students, about the Bessemer process and things like that. I've found that it's been interesting, a way to sort of expand what I know, and people that I wouldn't normally meet in my normal job.
How do you believe this involvement has helped your career?
So I think it has provided extra opportunities for networking. It's involved, especially for me, opportunities for my students. When I meet other people, I've been able to talk about opportunities that I want to offer my students. At UT Martin, they would host a science Olympiad that I took my students to several years. I had a student 2 years in a row place top 50 in the nation in that competition. And so I think for me, it hasn't been necessarily about my own personal growth, but what opportunities can I find that I can offer my students?
Would you recommend being involved in ACS or similar organizations for high school students or just students in general?
Absolutely. I think the more opportunities that you have to meet people, to share ideas and to collaborate, I think that students give themselves a better chance of finding something that they're really truly passionate about. I was thinking about earlier today, the Nobel Prizes have been awarded recently in the last week or so, and in I believe every scenario the prize was shared among 2 or more people, and it really highlights the need for collaboration in terms of working together towards a common goal, towards making discoveries. And so I think that the more students get used to networking with people and working together, the better off they're going to be career-wise.
I know we touched on this a little bit earlier, but how do you personally manage all your responsibilities while staying involved in these organizations?
I believe you have to prioritize. You have to ask yourself, does this obligation bring me joy? Does it do something to better myself personally or professionally? And if the answers to those things are yes, then you should go for it wholeheartedly. I also think that as I get older, I think about burning the candle at both ends, and you have to at some point say no to some things, and so you may have to reevaluate your priorities from time to time. And I think especially as a woman, as a mom, as a wife, I have to sort of give up some of the guilt of saying no to some things. I'd like to say yes to everything, but I know that it's not in my best interest or my family's best interest for me to be overextended. And so if I can really just say yes to the things that I'm passionate about that are going to help build me personally and professionally, then that's the best choice.
Do you have any other forms of advice that would be beneficial for future students as to balance their career and being involved in these societies?
I would say, yes, the advice that I would give students, I guess, that I haven't touched on is one of the most beneficial things for me as an undergraduate was getting involved in undergraduate research. And while that's not necessarily tied to a specific organization, it really does tie into the collaboration, the research, the networking. And we're very fortunate at Murray State to have a lot of opportunities for student research. With that, especially if you're thinking about going into science teaching, what better way to be able to share with your students real science, real scientific problem solving, than with being able to recount some of your experiences in the lab. I think it helps you understand more of the process of how scientific discoveries are made, the processes of constantly revising theories, things that students sometimes struggle with because many of them haven't had long-term experiments. It's very rare that we see scenarios where students are working on research in the high school level anyway for an extended period of time. They might do a 1 or 2 or 3 day lab, and that might be it. So really having them have some information about research is, I think, is helpful to them. So I would say whether I'm going into pre-professional or whether I'm going into teaching, undergraduate research would be something for every student to consider.
What advice do you wish someone gave you when you were going through your academic career and your professional career?
So a lot of times I tell my students, and they do, going back to the biology aspect of it, they say, well, Mrs. Gray, how did you end up with a biology degree but you're teaching chemistry? And the answer is calculus. And so I wish that in my high school advising, I had a conflict in my schedule where I had to choose one class or another, and I ended up choosing the class that ran at the same time as calculus. And so the calculus is oftentimes the issue between getting a biology degree or a chemistry degree. And so everybody has to take calculus for biology or chemistry, but you have to take, I believe, Calc 2 for a chemistry degree. And so I would encourage students to take as many math classes as possible while they are in high school, because a lot of times the high school math teachers have very sound pedagogical skills, and so students are able to go into university having a stronger foundation in their math skills, and that will allow them to do more things in the science without having the math courses be a roadblock for them.
Do you have any other forms of advice for aspiring college seniors going into your career path, or just seniors in general?
So college seniors, when we're going out for college fairs, if you're thinking about going into teaching, you may have had your heart set on teaching a certain content area or teaching at the high school level. Many times you'll start out at a lower level, maybe junior high, and that's okay. One of the biggest roadblocks in teaching is classroom management, and teaching middle school or teaching high school really gives you, or junior high school gives you a chance to solidify your classroom management skills, because middle schoolers have a lot of energy, and so you'll have to come up with some interesting ways to keep them sort of focused, but they are fairly easy to engage. High school students are a little bit opposite, right? Sometimes they like to sleep in class and they're maybe not as engaged, and so I think that don't have your heart set necessarily on teaching a certain grade level or teaching a certain content area, because those jobs may not be available. I would say though, anybody who's planning on going into teaching with a science background has a fairly decent shot of getting a job. You won't necessarily maybe be in your top choice of district if there's not a job open there, but you will probably be able to get a job. If not, long-term substitute positions are generally available, and they're a great way to get your foot in the door with a district. Be positive, be willing to help people, thinking about soft skills, not necessarily related to science, but just being a good employee, showing up on time, having a good attitude, being helpful. All of those things will do a lot in terms of being able to land a full-time position.
Do you have any suggestions for events or activities that the ACS KLS could do to encourage students and just chemists in general to get involved?
I would love to be able to start an ACS Chem Club at my school. This might not be the best year for it in terms of dealing with the pandemic, but having some support available, having speakers be able to come out and to do demonstrations with students. I also think that a lot of the times science content, the passion for science content really happens in the early elementary and middle school years. And when we're thinking about, Murray State does the career summit in the summertime for teachers, and maybe having some workshops or opportunities where elementary and middle school teachers who may not have a background in science learn how to incorporate some of these things into the classroom that are hands-on, might give them more confidence to do it with their students, but also engage a younger audience in science, so that by the time that they get to upper middle school and high school, they're really hooked on it. I think a lot of times if a teacher doesn't have a particular background in a subject area, he or she might feel intimidated to try that in front of their class, but maybe providing some opportunities for hands-on labs and things that teachers could quickly and easily incorporate into their classroom might be a good place to start.
Do you have any suggestions for lab demonstrations or activities like in summer that could be educational for students or for schools that have like limited resources?
I think there are a lot of opportunities out there, especially with in the vein of green science, things that don't provide or produce a lot of waste, or something that can easily be washed down the drain. I believe that there's probably several opportunities for science camps and things that can be done with a limited budget, but have a sort of a big effect on students. You want them to be wowed by something. You want it to be able to be tangible, to be observed fairly easily. And so those are some opportunities I think that we could work on for summertime camps or summertime workshops for students.
Once again, I would love to thank you for taking time out of your day to provide us with this wonderful information for the series of interviews for the Kentucky Lake chapter of the American Chemical Society.
Thank you.